Everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are going to completely shatter some of those widely accepted historical myths you've probably carried around your entire life. Seriously, we're peeling back the layers on these popular narratives to find the hidden and honestly way more fascinating truth underneath. So get ready to rethink history, because what we're about to uncover is literally going to change how you view the past.
So, what do the Titanic, the Egyptian pyramids, and Vikings all have in common? I mean, really think about that for a second. We've got a tragic luxury liner, ancient architectural marvels, and fierce seafaring warriors. On the surface, they seem completely disconnected, right? Separated by huge oceans and literally centuries of time. But there is actually a hidden thread tying all three of these iconic subjects together. Hold on to that question in the back of your mind, because we're going to unravel the answer together, piece by piece.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Titanic's biggest myth, sinking the unsinkable.
Let's just be honest with ourselves for a second here. Was the Titanic ever actually advertised as unsinkable? Now, you might be thinking, well, if you've watched the blockbuster movies, read the novels, or just soaked it up through cultural osmosis, your immediate answer is probably a resounding yes. It's kind of the central irony of the whole tragedy, right? The hubris is man building this unstoppable ship, heavily marketed as totally invincible, only for it to sink on its maiden voyage. That is the story we all know.
But the reality? The reality is actually staggering. The whole unsinkable myth emerged only after the disaster took place. Literally only after. So the White Star Line was definitely not running around printing brochures boasting that the ocean couldn't claim their ship. That entire narrative of corporate arrogance leading up to the launch, it's a complete retrospective fabrication. Society basically attached that label to the ship retroactively just to make sense of this overwhelming tragedy, turning a horrific maritime accident into, a neat little moral fable. That's a massive revelation, but trust me, it is definitely not an isolated incident.
Section 2. Rapid-fire history debunked. Shattering foundational facts.
And this brilliantly illustrates our point. We all know the foundational myth that slaves built the pyramids, right? It's everywhere. But the reality? They were actually built by an organized workforce of paid laborers. Yep, paid laborers. Just like the Titanic's marketing, the truth is entirely different from the story we've all inherited. This incredible engineering feat was accomplished by a compensated workforce, which completely upends that brutal Hollywood image we've been fed our whole lives.
Let's keep this momentum going. Think of the quintessential visual of a Viking warrior. You're picturing horned helmets for sure, but the historical reality? No horns on the helmets. None at all. And this establishes a very clear pattern of historical distortion for us. The defining characteristics we so strongly associate with these people and events are often just dramatic embellishments tacked on much, much later. So if facts are so easily distorted, how do we explain the things that seem practically unexplainable?
Let's slow things down a bit for Section 3. Predicting the Titanic disaster. Demystifying the magic.
Okay, so in 1912, the Titanic disaster happens. We all know that. But a staggering 14 years prior to that, way back in 1898, a man named Morgan Robertson wrote a story that basically predicted the entire tragedy. I mean, we're talking about a massive, luxurious, seemingly invincible ocean liner striking an iceberg in the frigid North Atlantic. For decades, people have looked at this timeline and thought Robertson must have possessed some kind of supernatural foresight, literal magic.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how just a few basic facts completely dismantle that whole mystical vibe. Morgan Robertson wasn't a psychic. He was an incredibly experienced sailor. He deeply understood the massive safety failures inherent in the maritime industry at that time. And crucially, he tracked the shipping trends. He saw ships getting larger, faster, and way more luxurious, while life-saving regulations were just completely stagnant. He didn't use magic to predict the Titanic, guys. He used science, observation, and logical deduction. The magic is really just what we call it when we lose the context of his actual expertise.
Let's move to our final point and see how all this builds together. Section 4. The gradual decline of data. How truth decays. Here is the defining concept behind this entire explainer. The gradual decline of data is a process where original truths are obscured by centuries of cultural evolution. This is exactly why the Titanic was labeled unsinkable only after it sank. It's why the paid laborers of ancient Egypt magically transformed into slaves in our collective memory, and it's why Vikings suddenly grew horns. It's usually not some malicious lie, it's just the natural, frankly inevitable, decay of raw data as it passes through the filter of culture, storytelling, and time. We essentially reshape facts to fit the narratives we want to tell. And the source material gives us this incredibly poignant quote to really drive the concept home. This gradual decline of data is much like the slow decline of the Library of Alexandria. Think about what that represents for a second. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just burned down in one single dramatic Hollywood fire. No, it suffered this slow, tragic loss of the ancient world's greatest repository of knowledge over generations. And we are experiencing the exact same thing today. Every single time a historical reality is replaced by a catchy myth, a tiny piece of our collective Library of Alexandria just fades away. Understanding this is absolutely crucial for how we consume information right now.
Which brings us to this final lingering thought. If cultural evolution obscures original truths, what else that you know is actually a myth? If the defining traits of the Titanic, the pyramids, and the Vikings are all just products of this data decline, what other foundational facts in your life are actually just comfortable illusions? I really encourage you to take this framework, look critically at the stories you've been told, and start investigating your own assumptions. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, stay curious.